Well, over the next 2 weeks, I'm about to experience the worst personal impact of COVID-19. I mean, I'm not going to actually experience anything really bad. My life is going to be pretty much the same as it's been for the last few months. But this was supposed to be the week that my wife and I were going to fly to Hawaii and spend a little over a week there just hanging out on Oahu, and most importantly, attending Lost 2020, the gathering of Lost fans that has happened every 3 years since 2014. We were going to meet up with old friends that we met at previous events, go explore a bunch of the Lost filming locations, attending a bunch of other organized events, including meeting a few of the actors who appeared on Lost. So yeah, my wife and I registered for the event, booked our plane tickets, booked an Airbnb just before COVID-19 happened. So obviously we had to cancel all that. Yeah, it was a big thing we were really looking forward to this year, and so yeah, we're pretty bummed out when we had to cancel. Now, of course, I realize this is hardly anything compared to like other ways people have been impacted by this whole coronavirus pandemic. Obviously, the people who died and the people who were close to those who died, I mean, those are the ones who suffered the worst. And then there's all the people who lost their jobs. I'm just saying, this whole canceling the Hawaii trip is just the worst aspect for me personally, because I haven't really experienced anything else really bad. And I've talked about this in past videos, just realizing the fact that I haven't been personally impacted by the coronavirus in ways that a lot of other people have. I'm still employed, my wife is still employed, we're both able to work from home, my church meets online, and the whole rest of the time, my wife and I get to spend that time with each other. Quarantine hasn't affected our marriage as far as I can tell. And like I mentioned before, none of this is a result of anything special that I did to prepare for an event like this. It's just that I was fortunate enough to be in a situation that more or less protected me from the kinds of negative impacts that this quarantine has had on a lot of other people. So this kind of got me thinking, what if the coronavirus had happened any other year? And how would that have affected me during that year? Now, some of you might be interested in theorizing, how would the world have been impacted if the coronavirus had happened in certain specific past years? I'm a sensing type. I don't think that broadly. You want to theorize, you can do that on your own. I'm just interested in theorizing how my own life would have been affected. Maybe you might consider that egotistical, but whatever. If I had to choose between this year and last year, I think I would have chosen last year just because of this whole Hawaii trip that we were going to take this year. Last year, we didn't really have anything going on in the first half of the year, so that would have been a perfect time for us to be self-quarantined. And it's the only other year in my life that my wife and I were married. Now, go back to the year before that, 2018 or 2017, that would have really sucked for me and my wife because we weren't married then. She was living in another state, and so we had to travel just to see each other. Well, with the lockdown, we wouldn't be able to see each other. So, yeah. Plus, 2018, that's the year that we got married. If it had happened in the beginning of 2018, we hadn't even set our wedding date yet. So I think we would have held off until the end of the pandemic before figuring out when we were going to get married. And if the coronavirus had happened in the first half of 2016, my wife and I never would have even met. We would have been Facebook friends because we were Facebook friends already by that time, but I wouldn't have flown to her city. The circumstances under which we officially met in person, which led to us discovering that we were interested in each other, yeah, that wouldn't have happened because that whole event would have been canceled. And so, who knows if we would have even had another opportunity to start a relationship. Now, as for the years before that, 2015, 2014, 2013, I think I would have been okay with that. Most of those years, I generally didn't do a whole lot in the first half of the year. The main issue is because I was still single, I think I probably would have had a harder time going this long without social contact because I would have been totally isolated. I would have enjoyed it at first. I am after all, I'm an extreme introvert. I've gone, when I was single, I went several days in a row snowed in, and I was perfectly fine, but, that was just days. This is months. So, yeah, it probably would have eventually started to take its toll on me, just like it's been for almost everyone else. And then it starts to get worse the further back in time you go, because then you don't have the technology that allows us to connect over social media, over video chats, because now we're into the period before even Google Hangouts or before Skype, and then just a few years before that, hardly anyone's even on social media. So my contact with other people would have been basically my so-called internet friends. Oh, and I was heavily into swing dancing back then, so I would have had to give up my favorite hobby for a while. 2002 would have made a huge difference in my life because that was the year that I moved from California to Washington, and it happened because Microsoft bought out the small company that I was working for. And so if this coronavirus had happened in the first half of 2002, none of that would have happened. I might still be living in California to this day. Oh man, 1996 would have really sucked if the coronavirus had happened. Because that was within my first year of living on my own after I graduated college the previous year. I was still new to my area, still in the process of meeting people, hadn't settled down in a church yet. And, obviously that being the mid-90s, people were still just being introduced to the internet and email. We were all using dial-up, and so we weren't constantly connected like we are now. I don't think it would have had like a permanent effect on my life, but I would have been miserable. And then we get back into my college years and then my high school years. And, it's hard to tell like how things would have been back then if the coronavirus had happened because, back then we didn't have the technology to have classes online like they do now. There was hardly even any homeschooling happening back then. So, my guess would be they would have just flat out canceled school everywhere. And, I don't think the aspect of not going to school would have been a big deal for me, other than the delaying of my graduation. The experience as it happened would have just felt like an extended summer vacation. But, of course, it would have still sucked to not be able to see my friends. Although, if I had to pick a year from my childhood for the coronavirus to happen, I think 1985 would have been a good year because I was in 7th grade and my social life was just falling apart. And I don't even remember exactly why, and I'm pretty sure it was my own fault. But I basically had to reboot my social life the following school year and get a whole new set of friends. Eventually it worked out for the better, but for the earlier part of 1985 and extending into summer, I basically didn't have any friends and I was kind of lonely. And so, like, coronavirus had hit, I'd be like, yeah, now all you people know how I feel. Yeah. So, yeah, after all that, I think if I had the ability to pick any year for the coronavirus to happen, my pick would still be last year, 2019. Yeah, the technology and social media would have been relatively the same. I would have still had my wife to be quarantined with, and I wouldn't have had to cancel the Hawaii trip this year. But, like I said, that's just me. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there whose lives have been way worse if the coronavirus had happened last year. Maybe last year was like, what, 2018 or 2017 or 2016 would have been for me. Or, 2002 or 1996 or any of those years that I mentioned it would be a bad year for me to experience the coronavirus. So, in the end, things happened the way they did. Like I've said before, God has a plan, And, no matter how bad things seem now, I'm just continuing to trust that he will get us all through this. Oh, and in case you're wondering, I was able to donate those extra N95 masks that I had. The Seattle Mask Brigade contacted me, and we arranged for somebody to come pick them up off my front porch. And so, yeah, that's done, and now I don't have to feel as guilty for having those N95 masks. Well, that's about all I have to say for now, so see you again in 2 weeks. Oh man, I forgot to order my wedding ring.